One of the greatest mysteries of human civilization stands on the green hills of ancient Britain. Stonehenge is not just a pile of stones, but a complex astronomical computer created 4,000 years ago. The latest archaeological discoveries show that this complex was built over a period of 1,500 years by different peoples, surpassing modern observatories in accuracy. Who were these ingenious builders, and why did they need to create a stone symphony that has been sounding for millennia? If you are fascinated by the history of Europe's greatest megalith, subscribe to our channel and learn more about the mysteries of ancient civilizations. And in the comments, share your opinion. Could Stone Age people have possessed such profound astronomical knowledge without the help of more developed civilizations? Or is this proof of the underestimated genius of our ancestors? In the green hills of Wiltshire, where the wind blows freely across the endless plains of the Salisbury Plain, stands one of the most mysterious monuments of human civilization. Stonehenge is not just a pile of ancient stones, as it might seem to a casual traveler. It is a complex archaeological complex created over 1,500 years by different peoples, each of whom contributed to this stone symphony. Imagine 5,000 years ago, when the first pyramids were just beginning to be built in Egypt and writing was emerging in Mesopotamia, people with remarkable knowledge of astronomy and engineering lived on the British Isles. They created a structure whose accuracy in determining astronomical events surpasses many modern observatories. How is this possible? For decades, archaeologists have tried to unravel this mystery. Who were these mysterious builders? What technologies did they possess? And most importantly, why did they need to expend enormous effort to build this giant stone calendar? After all, delivering just one sarsen block weighing 30 tons from the Marlborough Downs quarry required the participation of several hundred people and months of hard labor. Answers to these questions have only begun to emerge in recent decades, thanks to revolutionary archaeological research methods. LIDAR scanning has revealed structures hidden underground. Isotopic analysis of bones has made it possible to determine the origin of the ancient builders. Genetic research has shown the migration flows of Bronze Age peoples. Radiocarbon dating has determined the chronology of construction with unprecedented accuracy. It turns out that Stonehenge is not the creation of a single civilization, but the result of a cultural relay passed down from generation to generation. The first wooden posts were erected here by Mesolithic hunters about 8,000 years ago. Then came the Neolithic farmers, who dug a circular ditch and created the first sanctuary. Later, the Bell Beaker culture brought new rituals and technologies. Each era left its mark on this amazing complex. But the most striking discovery awaited researchers when they began to study the astronomical properties of Stonehenge. It turned out that the stone blocks are positioned with such precision that they allow one to predict solar and lunar eclipses, determine the days of solstices and equinoxes, and keep an accurate calendar. It was a real Stone Age computer, created by people we used to consider primitive savages. Each new archaeological discovery adds new pieces to this amazing puzzle. Recent excavations have shown that Stonehenge was only the center of a vast ritual landscape that included dozens of burial mounds, wooden circles, and stone avenues. It was a sacred city of the dead, where for centuries people came from all over the British Isles and even from the European continent. The history of Stonehenge is a story of human genius, perseverance, and the quest to understand the mysteries of the universe. It is a story of how our distant ancestors, without writing or metal tools, managed to create a work that still amazes scientists and ordinary people alike. And perhaps the most important discoveries are yet to come. Long before the first stone blocks were laid at the foundation of Stonehenge, human voices were already heard on the hills of the Salisbury Plain. About 8,000 years ago, when the glaciers finally receded from the British Isles, Mesolithic hunter-gatherers came here. These people were far from being primitive savages. They had a complex spiritual culture and amazing knowledge of the world around them. In 2008, British archaeologists made a sensational discovery that completely changed our understanding of the early history of Stonehenge. During excavations of a parking lot near the monument, they discovered a series of massive pits arranged in an arc. Radiocarbon analysis of charcoal from these pits revealed their incredible age, about 8,400 years. This meant that people began to use this place as a sacred site as early as the Mesolithic period, 3,000 years before the first stones appeared. What were these mysterious pits? Archaeologists reconstructed an amazing picture. In each pit stood a huge pine pole up to 10 meters high and about 75 centimeters in diameter. These wooden giants were oriented strictly according to the cardinal points and were obviously used for astronomical observations. Mesolithic people watched the movement of the sun and stars with the same care as their descendants, the builders of Stonehenge. Analysis of pollen from ancient soil layers has shown that 8,000 years ago, the landscape of the Salisbury Plain was radically different from today's. Instead of open chalk hills, there were dense pine forests. These forests were home to the last Stone Age hunters, people who knew how to make complex composite bows, weave baskets from willow twigs, and create amazing works of art from deer antlers. The Mesolithic inhabitants of Britain were not nomads in the full sense of the word. They lived in semi-sedentary settlements, moving seasonally between summer and winter camps. Archaeological finds testify to the complex social organization of these communities. They had specialists in the manufacture of stone tools, bone carvers, and experts in medicinal plants. And, most importantly, they had shamans, people responsible for communicating with the spiritual world. It was probably the shamans who determined the locations for the wooden totem poles. These people had a deep knowledge of astronomy. They knew that the sun rises at different points on the horizon in different seasons. They knew how to predict the phases of the moon and possibly even eclipses. Their wooden observatories were the predecessors of the stone Stonehenge. Why did this place become sacred to Mesolithic people? Modern research shows that the hill on which Stonehenge stands has unique acoustic properties. Sounds propagate in a special way here, creating the effect of a natural amphitheater. Perhaps ancient shamans noticed this feature and began to use the hill for ritual ceremonies. Mesolithic wooden pillars stood here for several hundred years. Gradually, they rotted and fell, but the place was not forgotten. The sacred tradition was passed down from generation to generation. When Neolithic farmers came to Britain, bringing with them agriculture and animal husbandry, they did not destroy the ancient sanctuary, but continued to develop it. The discovery of Stonehenge's Mesolithic roots revolutionized archaeological science. It became clear that this monument had much deeper historical roots than previously thought. Human activity at this site continued uninterrupted for almost 6,000 years, from the Mesolithic to the Bronze Age. This makes Stonehenge one of the longest used sacred sites in the world. The history of Mesolithic hunters reminds us that our distant ancestors were much more sophisticated and wise than we tend to think. They laid the foundation for a tradition that ultimately led to the creation of Europe's greatest megalithic complex. About 6,000 years ago, life in Britain changed dramatically. People came from the continent, bringing with them revolutionary technologies, agriculture, and animal husbandry. These Neolithic farmers did not conquer the island by force of arms. They peacefully integrated with the local hunter-gatherers, creating a new mixed culture. One of the first manifestations of this cultural synthesis was the transformation of the ancient sanctuary at Stonehenge into a grandiose ritual complex. The Neolithic Revolution brought not only new ways of obtaining food to Britain, but also a completely different ideology. Hunter-gatherers lived in harmony with nature, adapting to its rhythms. Farmers, on the other hand, sought to subjugate nature to their will. They cleared forests for arable land, built permanent settlements, and created monumental structures designed to demonstrate man's power over the surrounding world. The first Neolithic phase of Stonehenge's construction began around 3000 BC. This was the heyday of the Long Barrow culture, a mysterious civilization that left behind hundreds of monumental burial structures throughout Britain. These people possessed remarkable organizational abilities and engineering skills. The Neolithic builders began by digging a huge circular ditch with a diameter of 110 meters. It was a colossal task, considering that they had to work with hard chalk soil using deer antlers and stone picks. Modern experiments have shown that it would have taken several hundred people working for several months to create such a ditch. The earth from the ditch was not scattered randomly, but neatly stacked into two mounds, an inner and an outer one. The result was a perfect circle, which has survived to this day and is clearly visible in aerial photographs. Inside this earthen ring, Neolithic builders erected 56 wooden posts arranged in a perfect circle. These posts were named Aubrey Holes, after the 17th century English antiquarian John Aubrey, who first discovered them. The purpose of Aubrey Holes remained a mystery for a long time. Some researchers suggested that wooden or stone pillars stood in them. Others considered them burial pits. But in recent decades, a new hypothesis has emerged based on computer modeling. It turned out that if you move stones around the Aubrey Holes in a certain pattern, you can predict lunar eclipses with surprising accuracy. Neolithic farmers attached great importance to astronomical observations. The timing of sowing and harvesting depended on the accurate determination of the seasons. The lunar calendar helped them plan religious festivals and rituals. Knowledge of upcoming eclipses gave priests enormous power over their tribesmen. Stonehenge became the center of these complex astronomical calculations. But Neolithic Stonehenge was not only an observatory, but also a necropolis. Archaeologists have discovered more than 60 cremations, the remains of burned bodies, in the earthen ring. Isotopic analysis of the bones revealed a striking fact. Many of the people buried here were born far from the Salisbury Plain. They came here from Wales, Scotland, and continental Europe. Stonehenge was already a place of pilgrimage at that time. Who were these people who were honored with burial in the sacred circle? Study of the skeletal remains showed that among them were both men and women of various ages. Some bore traces of hard physical labor, while others, on the contrary, led relatively easy lives. It is likely that representatives of the priestly caste were buried here, people responsible for maintaining astronomical knowledge and ritual traditions. The Neolithic phase of Stonehenge lasted about 500 years. During this time, the earthen sanctuary became the center of a huge ritual landscape. Dozens of burial mounds, wooden circles, and stone alleys appeared around it. The entire Salisbury Plain became a sacred territory where the living communicated with the dead, and priests read the messages of the gods through the movement of the heavenly bodies. Around 2600 BC, a new era began in the history of Stonehenge. Simple earthen structures were replaced by stone structures of unprecedented complexity. The first stones to appear in the sanctuary were the mysterious bluestones, bluish dolerites from distant Wales, the delivery of which remains one of the greatest mysteries of ancient engineering. Bluestones got their name from the characteristic bluish tint they acquire in wet weather. These are volcanic rocks, dolerites and rhyolites, formed about 470 million years ago. Petrographic analysis has shown that these stones originate from the Preseli Hills in Pembrokeshire, West Wales. The distance from the quarries to Stonehenge is about 250 kilometers in a straight line, and the actual transport route was even longer. Each bluestone weighed between 2 and 4 tons. A total of 82 such stones were delivered to Stonehenge. This means that the total weight of the load was over 250 tons. How did the people of the Bronze Age, who did not know the wheel or metal tools, manage to transport such a load over such a great distance? This mystery has puzzled archaeologists for decades. The first hypotheses were quite extravagant. In 1920, geologist Herbert Thomas suggested that the stones had been brought by a glacier during the last ice age. But further research showed that glaciers did not reach the Salisbury Plain, and the bluestones show signs of artificial processing. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists attempted to reproduce the ancient method of transporting stones. Experiments showed that a group of 24 people could drag a 2-ton block across a flat surface on wooden rollers at a speed of about 1.5 kilometers per day. But on the way from Wales to Stonehenge, there were rivers, swamps, and steep hills, obstacles that made land transport extremely difficult. Therefore, scientists suggested that the stones were transported mainly by water. The reconstructed route looked like this. From the quarries in Preseli, the bluestones were lowered to the sea coast, then transported on rafts across the Bristol Channel, lifted up the Avon and Wye rivers, and the last 30 kilometers were dragged overland to Stonehenge. The entire journey took several months and required the participation of hundreds of people. But why did the ancient builders need to make such a colossal effort? Why didn't they use local sarsen stones, which were abundant on the Salisbury Plain? The answer to this question can be found in the religious beliefs of the Bronze Age people. The Preseli Hills had been sacred to Celtic tribes for thousands of years. Ancient sanctuaries, stone circles, and burial mounds were located here. Local dolerites possessed special magical properties. This is evidenced by medieval Welsh legends in which the Preseli stones are called healing stones. Perhaps ancient people believed that these stones could cure diseases or provide a connection with the spirits of their ancestors. Modern research has confirmed that bluestones do indeed have unusual properties. When struck with a hammer, they emit a melodious ringing sound reminiscent of a bell. This effect is due to the unique crystalline structure of dolerite. It is possible that Neolithic priests used bluestones as musical instruments during ritual ceremonies. The delivery of bluestones to Stonehenge was the first act in the grand drama of transforming an ancient sanctuary into the greatest megalithic complex in Europe. These bluish stones from distant Wales were placed inside an ancient earthen ring, creating the first stone circle. This was a revolutionary step that transformed Stonehenge from a simple sanctuary into a true open-air temple. Around 2500 BC, a truly revolutionary moment occurred in the history of Stonehenge. Giant sarsen blocks, true stone giants that defined the modern appearance of the monument, were added to the already established ring of bluestones. These 30-ton monoliths became the greatest achievement of prehistoric engineering, demonstrating the incredible skill of ancient builders. Sarsens are huge sandstone boulders that formed about 65 million years ago. The name comes from a distortion of Saracen, which was the medieval term for anything pagan and mysterious. These stones are silicified sandstone of exceptional hardness. On the Mohs scale, their hardness reaches 7 points, almost like quartz. Processing such material with stone tools required truly titanic efforts. Sarsen blocks were quarried in the Marlborough Downs, located 30 kilometers north of Stonehenge. In this area, you can still see huge boulders scattered around, which the locals call grey goats. Ancient craftsmen selected the most suitable specimens in terms of size and shape from these natural boulders. Transporting sarsen stones was even more difficult than delivering bluestones. The largest blocks weighed up to 50 tons. Modern experiments have shown that at least 600 people were needed to move such a load. The stones were placed on wooden sleds and slowly dragged along specially prepared roads, reinforced with logs and stones. But the real miracle of engineering began after the stones were delivered to the construction site. Ancient craftsmen had to give the rough boulders a precise shape, create a complex system of grooves and spikes, and then install multi-ton blocks with millimeter precision. And all this was done with the help of stone tools and the simplest mechanisms. The sarsens were processed using stone hammers. Archaeologists have found thousands of such hammers around Stonehenge. Rounded flint and dolomite stones weighing from half a kilogram to 20 kilograms. Experimental archaeology has shown that it took about 1.5 million blows and the participation of 20 craftsmen over 3 years to shape a single 30-ton block. The system of joints used at Stonehenge is particularly impressive. The vertical pillars, or menhirs, had protrusions or spikes on their upper surface, while the horizontal crossbars, or lintels, had corresponding recesses or grooves. This system, known as tongue and groove, ensured a strong connection between the structural elements and prevented them from shifting during earthquakes. In addition, the lintels were connected to each other by a quarter system. Each lintel had a protrusion at one end and a recess at the other. This created a continuous ring of horizontal blocks. Such a complex system of connections required incredible precision in stone processing and a deep knowledge of statics. Installing the finished blocks was no less difficult a task. Vertical menhirs weighing up to 45 tons had to be lifted and precisely placed in pre-dug pits. Archaeologists suggest that wooden ramps and a system of levers were used for this purpose. The stone was slowly lifted up an inclined plane and then carefully lowered into the pit. Even more difficult was the installation of crossbars at a height of 4 meters. Some researchers believe that temporary earthen platforms were built for this purpose. Others suggest the use of wooden scaffolding and blocks. Still others hypothesize the use of a system of levers and counterweights. The result of these titanic efforts was the creation of a unique architectural structure. 30 sarsen trilithons forming 2 concentric rings. The outer ring consisted of 30 vertical pillars connected by a continuous ring of lintels. Inside were 5 freestanding trilithons, grand gates up to 7 meters high. The Sarsen Ring of Stonehenge became the pinnacle of prehistoric architecture in Europe. This structure has stood for more than 4,000 years, surviving storms, earthquakes, wars, and human vandalism. To this day, it amazes everyone with its monumentality and perfect proportions. Around 2000 BC, historical changes once again intervened in the lives of the builders of Stonehenge. The British Isles were visited by the Bell Beaker culture, a mysterious people who brought with them revolutionary technologies and a completely new worldview. These people did not destroy the ancient sanctuary, but radically changed its purpose and structure. The Bell Beaker culture got its name from the characteristic ceramic vessels of a special shape, resembling an inverted bell. These elegant items were decorated with complex geometric patterns and were made with remarkable skill. But the bell-shaped cups were not just tableware. They served as ritual vessels for drinking a special beverage that played an important role in religious ceremonies. Analysis of organic residues from ancient cups showed surprising results. It turned out that they contained alcohol, honey, and various psychoactive plants. It was a kind of drink of the gods used by priests and chiefs to achieve altered states of consciousness. The consumption of such drinks was an important part of rituals associated with the worship of the sun and moon. The bearers of the Bell Beaker culture were the first metallurgists in Britain. They knew how to extract and process copper, tin, and gold. Their bronze axes, daggers, and jewelry were of high quality and exquisite design. Their knowledge of metallurgy gave them a huge advantage over the local population and contributed to the rapid spread of their culture. Genetic research has shown that the people of the Bell Beaker culture were of mixed origin. Their gene pool contained elements of both Western European hunter-gatherers and Near Eastern farmers. But the greatest contribution came from the steppe peoples of the Pontic-Caspian steppes, the very Indo-Europeans who brought the Proto-Indo-European language and burial mound culture to Europe. The arrival of the Bell Beaker culture in Britain was not a peaceful migration. Genetic data shows that about 90% of the male population of the island was replaced by newcomers. This suggests massive military conflicts and demographic catastrophes. The ancient Neolithic civilization of the builders of Stonehenge was virtually destroyed. However, the new masters of Britain did not destroy the great sanctuary. On the contrary, they undertook a large-scale reconstruction of the complex, adapting it to their religious needs. The bluestones were rearranged to form a new configuration within the Sarsen Ring. New stone structures appeared, oriented towards the summer solstice. The most important innovation was the creation of the famous avenue, a stone alley leading from Stonehenge to the River Avon. This road, more than 2 kilometers long, was bordered on both sides by earthen embankments and ditches. The avenue is precisely oriented towards the point of sunrise on the summer solstice, which emphasizes the astronomical significance of the complex. The bearers of the bell-shaped cup culture also changed the burial traditions of Stonehenge. Whereas cremation had previously been practiced here, individual burials in wooden coffins or stone cists now appeared. The dead were buried with rich grave goods, cups, bronze items, gold jewelry, and amber beads. One of the most famous burials of this period is the grave of the so-called Archer of Amesbury. This man was buried around 2030 BC, just 5 kilometers from Stonehenge. Archaeologists found more than 100 different items in his grave: flint arrowheads, copper daggers, gold earrings, stone bracelets, and ceramic cups. Isotopic analysis of the archer's teeth showed that he was born in the Alps, possibly in what is now Switzerland. This once again confirms the international character of Stonehenge during the Bronze Age. People came here from all over Europe to worship the ancient gods and gain the magical power of the sacred stones. The culture of bell-shaped cups brought an element of individualism to Stonehenge that was foreign to the collectivist Neolithic tradition. Whereas previously the sanctuary had served the entire tribe, it now became a place for the elite to demonstrate their power and wealth. The rich burials around the complex testify to the emergence of a strict social hierarchy. It was during the Bell Beaker era that Stonehenge acquired its final appearance. Further alterations were only cosmetic in nature. The great sanctuary reached the peak of its development and became the monument we see today. The bearers of the Bell Beaker culture completed a centuries-long process of construction, creating the greatest megalithic complex in Europe. The influence of this culture on the history of Stonehenge cannot be overestimated. It was they who transformed the ancient sanctuary into a veritable open-air temple, combining the functions of an observatory, a necropolis, and a center of political power. Their innovations determined the appearance of the monument for thousands of years to come. One of the most striking aspects of Stonehenge is its incredible astronomical accuracy. This ancient complex functioned as a giant stone computer, capable of predicting the movement of celestial bodies with an accuracy that amazes modern scientists. 4,000 years ago, Bronze Age people created a tool for astronomical calculations that surpassed the capabilities of many modern observatories. The first person to notice the astronomical properties of Stonehenge was British antiquarian William Stackley in 1724. He noticed that the main axis of the complex is precisely aligned with the point of sunrise on the summer solstice. This orientation is so accurate that the deviation is only a few angular minutes, a remarkable achievement for people who did not have geodetic instruments. In the 20th century, astronomical research on Stonehenge gained new momentum thanks to the work of British astronomer Gerald Hawkins. Using computer modeling, he discovered that the complex contains many astronomical landmarks. Various pairs of stones point not only to the sunrise and sunset on the days of the solstices, but also to the extreme points of the moonrise and moonset. The moon moves along a more complex trajectory than the sun. Its orbit is tilted at an angle of about 5 degrees to the ecliptic, and this orbit slowly rotates in space. As a result, the points of moonrise and moonset are constantly shifting. The full cycle of these changes is 18.5 years, the so-called Saros. The ancient astronomers of Stonehenge knew about this cycle and used it to predict lunar eclipses. The Aubrey holes system, 56 holes arranged in a circle inside the earthwork, served as a kind of calculator for lunar calculations. By placing 3 markers in specific holes and moving them around the circle at 1-year intervals, it is possible to predict the moments of lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. This system was discovered by British astronomer Fred Hoyle in 1966. But Stonehenge's astronomical functions were not limited to predicting eclipses. The complex served as an accurate calendar that helped ancient people determine the seasons. In an agricultural society, this was of vital importance. Accurate knowledge of the dates of the beginning of spring fieldwork, summer harvest, and autumn sowing of winter crops determined the survival of the entire tribe. The Stonehenge solar calendar was based on observations of the sun's movement across the horizon. On the day of the winter solstice, December 21st, the sun rises at the southernmost point of the horizon and rises to its minimum height. On the day of the summer solstice, June 21st, the sun rises at the northernmost point and reaches its maximum height. The days of the spring and autumn equinoxes mark the moments when day and night are equal in length. The stones of Stonehenge are arranged in such a way as to accurately record all these important astronomical events. The famous heel stone points in the direction of the sunrise on the day of the summer solstice. The large trilithon in the center of the complex frames the point of sunset on the day of the winter solstice. Other pairs of stones mark the directions of the equinoxes. The lunar calendar was even more complex. The moon completes a full cycle of phases in 29.5 days. 12 lunar months make up 354 days, 11 days less than a solar year. To reconcile the lunar and solar calendars, ancient astronomers had to periodically add an extra month. The system of stones at Stonehenge allowed these complex calculations to be made. Predictions of eclipses were of particular importance. In the ancient world, eclipses were perceived as ominous omens that could influence the fate of kings and peoples. A priest who could accurately predict an eclipse wielded enormous power over his fellow tribesmen. He seemed to read the minds of the gods and know their plans for humanity. Modern computer models show that the Stonehenge system allowed eclipses to be predicted with an accuracy of several hours. This is an amazing achievement for people who lived 4,000 years ago. They did not know the true cause of eclipses, but they managed to calculate the mathematical patterns of these phenomena and create a mechanism for predicting them. The astronomical knowledge embodied in Stonehenge was passed down from generation to generation over the centuries. This knowledge was the secret of a caste of priest astronomers who preserved and developed ancient science. Perhaps it was the loss of this knowledge that led to the decline and oblivion of the great sanctuary at the end of the Bronze Age. Stonehenge was not only an astronomical observatory, but also a grand necropolis, a city of the dead, where representatives of the Bronze Age elite were buried for 1,500 years. Archaeological research in recent decades has shown that there were more than 300 burial mounds around the stone circle, containing the remains of thousands of people. These burials reveal an amazing picture of the social hierarchy and cultural ties of the ancient inhabitants of Britain. The tradition of burials in the Stonehenge area began in the Neolithic period, about 5,000 years ago. The first burials were cremations, the remains of which were placed in special pits inside the earthen ring. In total, archaeologists have found the remains of more than 60 people from the Neolithic period here. Isotopic analysis of the bones showed that many of them were born far from the Salisbury Plain, in Scotland, Wales, and even continental Europe. With the advent of the Bell Beaker culture, burial traditions changed dramatically. Cremation gave way to inhumation, the burial of whole bodies in wooden coffins or stone cists. The dead were laid in a crouched position on their side, facing east, toward the rising sun. Along with the deceased, rich grave goods were placed in the graves: ceramic cups, bronze daggers, gold jewelry, and amber beads. The most famous burial of this period was the Archer's Grave in Amesbury, discovered in 2002 just 5 kilometers from Stonehenge. In the burial, dated to approximately 2300 BC, archaeologists found more than 100 different items. It was a real treasure trove of the Bronze Age, demonstrating the incredible wealth and high social status of the buried person. The variety of materials in the archer's grave is particularly striking. The flint arrowheads were made from French flint. The copper daggers contained tin from Cornwall. The gold earrings were similar in style to European models. The amber beads came from the Baltic region. The stone bracelets were made from alpine slate. This man had trade connections throughout Europe. Isotope analysis of the archer's tooth enamel revealed even more surprising results. The ratio of oxygen and strontium isotopes indicated that he was born and spent his childhood in the Alpine region, possibly in what is now Switzerland or Austria. As an adult, he moved to Britain and lived here for the last years of his life. He may have been a merchant, a craftsman, or even a refugee seeking asylum on distant islands. Another grave was found near the archer, which was named the Archer's Companion. Genetic analysis showed that this was his relative, possibly his son or nephew. This man was born in Britain, but retained the cultural traditions of his continental origins. Expensive imported items were also found in his grave, albeit in smaller quantities. Social stratification in the Stonehenge area was very complex. Along with the rich burials of the elite, archaeologists discovered many modest graves of ordinary people. In them, they found only ceramic pots, stone tools, and sometimes bronze awls or needles. These people obviously made up the bulk of the population. Farmers, craftsmen, servants. A special group was made up of children's burials. Some children were buried with exceptionally rich grave goods, indicating the hereditary nature of high social status. One child, who died at the age of 3 or 4, was buried with a gold necklace, amber beads, and a bronze dagger. He obviously belonged to the ruling dynasty. Analysis of the remains revealed interesting details about the lives of ancient people. Many men showed signs of hard physical labor, developed muscles, arthritis, and broken bones. Some women showed signs of frequent childbirth and hard labor. The average life expectancy was about 35 years, although some people lived to be 50 or 60. The diet of the ancient inhabitants of the Stonehenge area was quite varied. Isotopic analysis of the bones showed that they ate beef, mutton, pork, and game such as deer, wild boar, and waterfowl. Their diet also included cereals such as wheat, barley, and rye. People living in coastal areas ate fish and shellfish. Some burials showed signs of ritual practices. Animal skulls from cattle, horses, and dogs were found in several graves. These animals may have been sacrificed during funeral ceremonies. Other burials contained amulets made of unusual materials, such as pieces of meteorite iron, rare minerals, and fossils. Stonehenge functioned as a necropolis throughout the Bronze Age and part of the Iron Age. The last burials date back to around the 7th century BC. Then the tradition was interrupted, and the sacred place was abandoned. But the memory of the great ancestors buried in the shadow of the stone giants remained in folk legends for many centuries. The creation of Stonehenge required ancient builders to solve the most complex engineering problems. How could a 40-ton stone block be lifted to a height of 4 meters? How could it be precisely placed in a predetermined location? How could a complex system of grooves and tenons be created without metal tools? For a long time, these questions seemed unsolvable. But modern experimental archaeology is beginning to lift the veil on the technological secrets of the ancient craftsmen. The main tools of ancient builders were stone hammers of various sizes and weights. Archaeologists have discovered more than 4,000 such tools around Stonehenge. made of hard rock types such as flint, dolomite, and sarsen. The smallest hammers weighed about 200 grams and were used for delicate work. The largest ones weighed up to 20 kilograms and were used for rough stone cutting. Experimental archaeology has shown that processing a single sarsen block required incredible effort. To shape a 30-ton stone into the desired form, the craftsmen had to deliver about 1.5 million precise blows with stone hammers. Working in a team of 20 people, this process took about 3 years. Just imagine the patience and skill required for such work. The task of creating a tongue and groove joint system was particularly difficult. Each vertical menhir stone had 2 protrusions about 15 centimeters high on its upper surface. The horizontal crossbars had corresponding recesses. This system required millimeter precision. The slightest error would have made it impossible to assemble the structure. Creating the grooves was a particularly laborious process. The craftsmen carved the recesses into the hard sarsen stone using the wedge and feather technique. A series of holes were drilled in the stone, into which wooden wedges were inserted. The wedges were then moistened with water. As they swelled, they created enormous pressure and split the stone. This method allowed large volumes of rock to be removed with relatively little effort. But the most difficult task was transporting and installing the finished blocks. Sarsen stones weighed between 25 and 50 tons each. They had to be transported from the Marlborough Downs quarries, located 30 kilometers from Stonehenge, and then precisely installed in their designated positions. Modern experiments in transporting stones have yielded surprising results. A group of enthusiasts led by archaeologist Mark Whiteby attempted to reproduce ancient transportation methods. They built wooden sleds and tried to drag a 40-ton concrete block. It turned out that this required the participation of at least 130 people on flat ground and up to 200 people on inclines. The road from the quarries to Stonehenge ran through hilly terrain with several steep inclines. The ancient builders had to prepare the route by removing obstacles and reinforcing soft areas with logs. On steep descents, it was necessary to create braking systems so that the multi-ton load would not crush people. Archaeologists have discovered traces of an ancient road leading from Marlborough Downs to Stonehenge. This route was carefully planned. It bypassed the steepest hills and used natural saddles in the terrain. In some places, the remains of wooden decking and stone retaining walls have been preserved. The construction of such a road was in itself a grandiose engineering project. The installation of vertical stones required no less skill. Each menhir had to be lifted from a horizontal position to a vertical one and precisely placed in a pre-dug hole. Experiments have shown that wooden ramps and a system of levers were used for this purpose. First, an inclined earthen platform was erected next to the installation site. The stone was slowly dragged along it to the edge of the pit. Then one end of the block was carefully lowered into the pit, while the other was lifted using levers and ropes. Lifting a 40-ton menhir required the efforts of several hundred people working in sync on command. Even more difficult was the installation of horizontal crossbars at a height of 4 meters. There are several hypotheses about how this was done. Some scientists believe that temporary earthen platforms were built, along which the crossbars were pulled up. Others suggest the use of wooden scaffolding and blocks. The most plausible hypothesis seems to be the use of a lever system. The crossbeam was gradually raised by placing more and more logs under it. This process could take several days, but it allowed the builders to avoid constructing massive auxiliary structures. The precision with which the stones were installed is astonishing. The vertical menhirs stand strictly in a circle, with deviations of only a few centimeters. The horizontal lintels form an almost perfect ring. Such accuracy was achieved through the use of simple but effective surveying methods, string geometry, and astronomical landmarks. The technologies used in the construction of Stonehenge testify to the highest level of engineering development in the Bronze Age. Ancient craftsmen were able to solve problems that still pose a serious challenge to builders today. Their achievements deserve no less admiration than the pyramids of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Stonehenge has unique acoustic properties that transform this ancient complex into a giant natural amphitheater. Modern research has shown that the location and shape of the stones create amazing sound effects, which were undoubtedly used by ancient priests to enhance the impact of ritual ceremonies. These discoveries force us to take a fresh look at the purpose of this great sanctuary. The first serious acoustic studies of Stonehenge were conducted at the end of the 20th century by a group of scientists led by acoustician Stephen Wenger from the University of Huddersfield. Using modern recording equipment and computer modeling, they discovered that the stone circle has properties characteristic of professional concert halls. Inside the Sarsen ring, the reverberation time, that is, the time it takes for sound to fade away, is about half a second. This is the optimal value for the perception of human speech and music. In modern theaters and concert halls, architects strive to achieve precisely this acoustic effect. The ancient builders of Stonehenge achieved it intuitively, guided by centuries of observation. The directional acoustic properties of the complex are particularly interesting. Sounds uttered in the center of the stone circle are amplified and focused in such a way that a person standing among the trilithons can speak in a normal voice and be heard at a distance of several hundred meters. This effect is created by the parabolic shape of the interior space and the reflective properties of the Sarsen surfaces. Computer modeling has shown that in a fully preserved Stonehenge, the acoustic properties were even more pronounced. A closed ring of 30 lintels created a resonance chamber effect that could amplify certain sound frequencies. Perhaps the ancient priests used this effect to create mystical sounds that captured the imagination of pilgrims. Bluestones also contribute to the acoustic properties of the complex. These dolerite stones from Wales have an amazing property. When struck, they produce a melodious ringing sound reminiscent of a bell. Different stones sound at different pitches, creating a kind of stone xylophone. Archaeologists have found traces of blows on many bluestones, confirming their use as musical instruments. Modern experiments with reproducing the sounds of bluestones have shown remarkable results. When several researchers simultaneously struck different stones with wooden sticks, a complex polyphonic melody with rich overtones emerged. These sounds could have served as accompaniment for ritual chants and dances. Acoustic studies have also revealed a connection between the acoustic properties of Stonehenge and astronomical phenomena. It turned out that the resonant frequencies of the stone circle correspond to certain mathematical ratios associated with the orbital periods of the moon and planets. Perhaps ancient astronomers used sound as an additional tool for recording celestial cycles. Of particular interest are the infrasonic effects at Stonehenge. Infrasound is sound vibrations with a frequency below the threshold of human perception. Such vibrations are inaudible, but can have a strong psychological effect, causing feelings of anxiety, awe, or ecstasy. Some researchers suggest that the stone structures of Stonehenge could generate infrasound, when exposed to wind. Experiments with recording and analyzing sounds at Stonehenge are conducted not only during the day, but also at night, under various weather conditions. It turned out that the acoustic properties of the complex vary significantly depending on temperature, humidity, and wind direction. On quiet summer nights, the stone circle turns into an ideal acoustic chamber where you can hear the slightest rustle from hundreds of meters away. Research has shown that ancient builders took acoustic factors into account when choosing a location for the sanctuary. The hill on which Stonehenge stands has natural resonance properties due to its geological structure. The chalk rocks that make up the hill create a natural sound amplifier effect. Perhaps it was these properties that attracted the first Mesolithic inhabitants here 8,000 years ago. Modern musicians and sound engineers are very interested in the acoustic properties of Stonehenge. In recent years, several music albums have been recorded here, using the unique sound effects of the ancient complex. These recordings help us to better understand what Bronze Age ritual ceremonies might have sounded like. The acoustic properties of Stonehenge remind us that ancient sanctuaries were not just stone structures, but living spaces filled with sounds, music, and human voices. Each ceremony was a theatrical performance in which architecture, astronomy, music, and ritual merged into a single whole, creating an unforgettable experience for participants and spectators alike. Stonehenge was not an isolated monument. It was part of a vast megalithic tradition that spanned Western Europe during the Neolithic and Bronze Ages. From northern Scotland to southern Spain, from the Atlantic coast of Ireland to the Alpine valleys, stone circles, dolmens, menhirs, and other monumental structures were built. This unified cultural tradition testifies to the existence of a developed system of contacts between the ancient peoples of Europe. The closest relatives of Stonehenge are the stone circles of the British Isles. Archaeologists have identified more than 1,300 such structures in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Most of them are much more modest than Stonehenge, but some are comparable in scale and complexity of construction. Particularly impressive is the Avebury complex in Wiltshire, located just 30 kilometers from Stonehenge. This giant stone circle, with a diameter of over 300 meters, is surrounded by an earthen rampart and a moat. Inside the large circle are two smaller circles, and stone alleys several kilometers long extend from the complex. In terms of scale, Avebury surpasses Stonehenge, although it is inferior to it in technical perfection. In Scotland, there is the famous Ring of Brodgar on the Orkney Islands. This circle of 27 stones dates back to approximately 2,500 BC, making it almost a contemporary of Stonehenge. The Ring of Brodgar also has astronomical orientations and served as a calendar for the ancient inhabitants of the Northern Islands. Ireland is famous for its passage tombs, corridor dolmens built in the Neolithic era. The most famous of these is Newgrange in the Boyne Valley. This mound, 80 meters in diameter and 13 meters high, contains a long stone corridor leading to a central chamber. On the day of the winter solstice, the sun's rays penetrate through a special window above the entrance and illuminate the chamber, just as at Stonehenge, where the sun shines through the Great Trilithon. Continental Europe is also rich in megalithic monuments. In France, there are grandiose rows of menhirs in Carnac, more than 3,000 vertically placed stones forming parallel alleys several kilometers long. These stones are also oriented according to astronomical directions and served as a giant stone calendar. In Germany, the remains of wooden circles, which were the predecessors of stone shrines, have been preserved. The famous Nebra sky disk, found in Saxony-Anhalt, demonstrates the high level of astronomical knowledge of the European peoples of the Bronze Age. This bronze disk depicts the sun, moon, stars, and the arc of the Milky Way with remarkable astronomical accuracy. The Iberian Peninsula is famous for its dolmens, stone burial chambers built from huge slabs. The dolmens of Antequera in Andalusia are comparable in size to the Egyptian mastabas. Their construction required no less effort than the building of Stonehenge and testifies to the high level of organization of Neolithic societies in Iberia. The parallels between Stonehenge and the megaliths of Malta are particularly interesting. The temple complexes of Gantija, Hagar Kim, and Menajdra show a striking similarity to British monuments in terms of astronomical orientation and architectural design. This similarity is all the more striking given that Malta is located 2,000 kilometers from Stonehenge. What united all these disparate monuments? Modern research shows that the megalithic tradition spread along sea routes. Neolithic sailors were able to cross large bodies of water and maintained contact between distant regions. They exchanged not only goods, but also ideas, technologies, and religious beliefs. Archaeological finds confirm the existence of extensive trade networks in the Neolithic and Bronze Ages. Amber from the Baltic region has been found in Portuguese burial sites. Jade axes from alpine quarries have been discovered in Britain and Denmark. Copper from Ireland was used to make products in France and Germany. These connections contributed to the spread of megalithic culture throughout Europe. But megalithic monuments are united not only by their common origin, but also by the similarity of their functions. They all served as astronomical observatories, religious centers, and burial sites for the elite. This indicates that the European peoples of the Neolithic and Bronze Ages had a common worldview and common ideas about the role of humans in the universe. The study of European megaliths helps to better understand Stonehenge's place in ancient history. This monument was not a unique phenomenon, but represented the pinnacle of a pan-European tradition of monumental construction. Its creators drew on the millennia-old experience of their predecessors and brought the art of megalithic architecture to perfection. Modern attempts to reconstruct ancient contacts between megalith builders reveal an amazing picture of a unified European civilization of the Stone and Bronze Ages. This civilization did not know writing or metallurgy, but possessed profound astronomical knowledge, advanced construction technologies, and a complex spiritual culture. Stonehenge was one of the greatest achievements of this forgotten civilization. About 1,000 years before our era, the great era of Stonehenge came to an end. The monument, which for 1,500 years had been the center of religious and astronomical life in Britain, gradually lost its significance and was abandoned. What happened? What forces led to the decline of the greatest sanctuary of ancient Europe? The answers to these questions can be found in the radical changes that took place in British society at the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of the Iron Age. The first signs of Stonehenge's decline appeared as early as the Late Bronze Age, around 1200 BC. Archaeological evidence shows that construction activity at the complex had virtually ceased. The last significant alterations date back to around 1400 BC. After that, only minor repairs and insignificant changes in the arrangement of individual stones were carried out at Stonehenge. One of the reasons for the decline was the Bronze Age crisis, a period of economic and social upheaval that swept across Europe in the 13th to 12th centuries BC. This crisis was caused by a combination of factors: climate change, disruption of trade links, migration of peoples, and internal conflicts. The complex system of exchange of metals and other resources that supported the prosperity of the Bronze Age elite collapsed. Climate change played a particularly important role in the fate of Stonehenge. Around 1200 BC, a period of cooling and humidification began in northern Europe. The warm and dry Atlantic period was replaced by a cool and wet sub-boreal period. These changes seriously affected agriculture, the basis of the Bronze Age economy. The deterioration of the climate led to a reduction in grain yields. Many fertile lands in the lowlands became swampy. The population was forced to migrate to higher ground, where the soil was less fertile. This placed additional strain on the ecosystem of the Salisbury Plain, which had already been intensively used for thousands of years. Paleoecological studies show that by the end of the Bronze Age, the area around Stonehenge was seriously depleted. Analysis of pollen from ancient soil layers indicates massive deforestation and degradation of pastures. The soils on the chalk hills were eroded. Many sources of fresh water dried up or became polluted. The ecological crisis was exacerbated by demographic problems. The population of Britain in the late Bronze Age reached its peak for the entire prehistoric era. Competition for resources intensified. Archaeological finds indicate an increase in violence. Fortified settlements appeared, the number of weapons in burials increased, and traces of injuries were found more often on human bones. The social system that supported the functioning of Stonehenge also underwent significant changes. In the early and Middle Bronze Age, power was concentrated in the hands of the priestly elite, who controlled astronomical knowledge and ritual practices. These people had sufficient resources to maintain and develop the great sanctuary. But by the end of the Bronze Age, the power of the priests had been undermined. A new type of leader emerged: military chiefs, who based their influence not on religious authority, but on their ability to protect their tribesmen from external enemies. These chiefs were less interested in astronomy and more interested in military affairs. Their priorities lay in the realm of practical politics rather than mystical rituals. The beginning of the Iron Age around 800 BC brought new technologies and a new culture. Iron tools were cheaper and more effective than bronze ones. This undermined the bronze smith's monopoly on the production of metal goods. The old elite, associated with the trade in bronze and tin, lost the economic basis of their power. The Celtic tribes that settled in Britain during the Iron Age brought with them a new religion and new rituals. Their Druid priests preferred to hold ceremonies in sacred groves rather than stone circles. Druidism was a more decentralized religion that did not require grandiose monumental structures such as Stonehenge. Attitudes toward astronomy also changed. While for the people of the Bronze Age, the accurate determination of the dates of the solstices and equinoxes was of vital importance, the Iron Age brought more flexible calendar systems. The Celts used a lunisolar calendar, which did not require such complex astronomical calculations as the Stonehenge system. The last reliable evidence of Stonehenge's use for ritual purposes dates back to the 7th or 6th centuries BC. After that, the great sanctuary was finally abandoned. The stones began to fall under the influence of wind, rain, and frost. Some blocks were taken away by local residents for construction needs. Thus ended the 1,500-year history of Stonehenge's active use. The monument, which had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations, itself fell victim to the inexorable passage of time. But even ruined and abandoned, it continued to capture people's imaginations and give rise to legends that have survived to this day. After Stonehenge was abandoned by its creators, the memory of the great sanctuary did not disappear without a trace. For centuries, this mysterious complex continued to capture people's imaginations, giving rise to many legends and myths. From medieval chronicles to modern theories of extraterrestrial intervention, the history of Stonehenge in the popular imagination is no less amazing than its actual archaeological biography. The first written references to Stonehenge appear in medieval sources. Anglo-Saxon chronicles from the 9th and 10th centuries refer to this place as Stanhengest, or Stonehenge, hanging stones. Even then, people understood that they were dealing with an artificial structure of incredible antiquity, but they could not explain its origin. The most famous medieval legend about Stonehenge was recorded by Geoffrey of Monmouth in his History of the Britons around 1136. According to this story, the stones were brought from Ireland by the great wizard Merlin on the orders of King Aurelius Ambrosius. The Irish stones had healing properties. If you poured water on them and washed the sick person in the resulting liquid, they would surely recover. The legend said that Irish giants once brought these stones from Africa and placed them on Mount Killarus. When the British tried to seize the stones by force, the Irish easily repelled all attacks. Then Merlin used his magic and moved the entire structure through the air to Britain, where it stands to this day. This fantastic story reflected medieval ideas about Stonehenge as a structure created by supernatural forces. In the late Middle Ages, new versions of the monument's origin appeared. Some chroniclers attributed the construction of Stonehenge to the Romans, others to the Saxons, and still others to the Danes. Particularly popular was the version that the complex was built by the Roman commander Ambrosius in memory of the Britons who fell in battle with the Saxons. This legend also explained the name of the place. Stonehenge was interpreted as hanged stones, that is, a monument to the hanged. During the Renaissance, interest in Stonehenge grew. Scientists of that time tried to find rational explanations for the origin of the monument. The Italian architect Palladio suggested that it was the ruins of a Roman temple to Apollo. In the 17th century, British antiquarian John Aubrey was the first to suggest that Stonehenge was built by ancient Druids, the priests of Celtic tribes. The Druid theory of Stonehenge's origin became particularly popular in the 18th century, thanks to the work of William Stakely. This scientist conducted the first serious archaeological research of the monument and discovered its astronomical orientation. Stakely was convinced that the Druids possessed profound scientific knowledge and created Stonehenge as a temple in the form of a planetarium. The Druid hypothesis persisted for almost 2 centuries and had a huge impact on the mass consciousness. In the Victorian era, a whole Neo-Druidism movement emerged, whose representatives regularly held ritual ceremonies at Stonehenge. This tradition continues to this day. Every year on the summer solstice, thousands of modern pagans gather at the ancient stones to greet the dawn. The 20th century brought new, even more extravagant theories about Stonehenge. With the development of aviation and the advent of aerial photography, it became clear that the monument was part of a huge complex of ancient structures scattered across the Salisbury Plain. This gave rise to theories about ley lines, supposed energy channels connecting various sacred sites. Supporters of the ley line theory claimed that ancient people had knowledge of the Earth's geomagnetic field and built their temples at the points where the energy lines intersected. According to this hypothesis, Stonehenge was a kind of power station, that accumulated and redistributed the Earth's energy. No scientific evidence for the existence of ley lines has ever been found, but this theory remains popular among supporters of alternative history. Even more fantastic explanations appeared in the second half of the 20th century in connection with the fashion for UFOs and paleo contacts. Some authors claim that Stonehenge was built by aliens or under their guidance. The trilithons allegedly served as landing pads for spaceships, and the entire complex was an intergalactic spaceport. Swiss writer Erich von Däniken, in his book Chariots of the Gods, developed a theory that all megalithic monuments on Earth, from Stonehenge to the statues of Easter Island, were created by visitors from outer space. In his opinion, ancient people did not possess the technology necessary to move multi-ton stones, so they must have been helped by representatives of a more advanced civilization. Modern science categorically rejects all paranormal explanations for the origin of Stonehenge. Archaeological research has conclusively proven that the monument was created by people of the Stone and Bronze Ages using technologies available at the time. No traces of intervention by alien civilizations or the use of unknown energies have been found. Nevertheless, myths and legends about Stonehenge continue to live on. They reflect a deep human need for miracles, a desire to find something more than just archaeological artifacts in the ancient past. Stonehenge remains a symbol of mystery, an enigma that continues to capture people's imagination thousands of years after its creation. A revolution in the study of Stonehenge began in the second half of the 20th century with the advent of fundamentally new methods of archaeological research. Modern technologies have allowed scientists to look back through the centuries and uncover secrets that seemed unsolvable to previous generations of researchers. LIDAR scanning, isotope analysis, genetic research, and radiocarbon dating. These methods have radically changed our understanding of the history of this great monument. One of the most important achievements was the use of LIDAR technology to study the landscape around Stonehenge. LIDAR is a remote sensing system that uses laser radiation to create a three-dimensional map of the terrain. With this technology, archaeologists were able to remove the vegetation cover and see ancient structures hidden underground. The results of the LIDAR scanning exceeded all expectations. It turned out that Stonehenge is surrounded by hundreds of previously unknown archaeological sites: burial mounds, ditches, post holes, and stone circles. A huge underground structure was discovered near Stonehenge. More than 90 massive pits arranged in a perfect circle with a diameter of 2 kilometers. This structure was named the Durrington Walls. Geophysical studies using magnetometers and ground-penetrating radar made it possible to study the internal structure of Stonehenge without disturbing the integrity of the monument. Scientists discovered traces of wooden posts that stood here before the stone structures appeared. A complex system of pits and trenches was found, which were used to transport and install megaliths. Radiocarbon dating revolutionized the chronology of Stonehenge. New, more accurate methods of carbon-14 analysis have made it possible to determine the time of construction of various parts of the complex with an accuracy of several decades. It turned out that Stonehenge was built much longer than previously thought, over 1,500 years, from the 31st to the 15th century BC. Isotope analysis of bone remains has revealed a surprising picture of ancient human migration. Studying the ratio of strontium, oxygen, and other elements in tooth enamel allows us to determine where a person spent their childhood. It turned out that many of the people buried at Stonehenge were born far from the Salisbury Plain. in Scotland, Wales, continental Europe, and even the Mediterranean. The results of the analysis of cremated remains from Stonehenge were particularly important. For a long time, it was believed that cremation destroyed all useful information about ancient people. But new methods have made it possible to extract isotope data even from burned bones. It turned out that a quarter of the people buried in Neolithic Stonehenge were not local residents. Genetic studies of ancient DNA have opened a new chapter in the study of Stonehenge. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA from skeletal remains showed that the population of Britain at the time of the monument's construction was genetically very diverse. It included descendants of Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, and steppe nomads from Eastern Europe. The history of population change in the Bronze Age was particularly dramatic. Genetic analysis showed that around 2500 BC, just when the Stonehenge sarsen ring was being built, up to 90% of the male population of Britain was replaced by newcomers. This shows there was a massive migration of people with the Bell Beaker culture. Petrographic analysis of the stones made it possible to accurately determine their origin. Each type of rock has a unique signature, a characteristic combination of minerals that allows its place of origin to be determined. Thus, it was proven that the bluestones did indeed come from the Preseli Hills in Wales and the sarsens from the Marlborough Downs. Modern methods have also made it possible to study the techniques used by ancient builders. Traceological analysis of the marks left on the stones revealed the tools used by Stone Age craftsmen. Experiments to reproduce ancient techniques helped to understand how much time and manpower was required to create the various elements of the complex. Computer modeling made it possible to reconstruct the original appearance of Stonehenge and trace all stages of its construction. Three-dimensional models show what the monument looked like in different historical periods, which stones were added, and which were moved or removed. Astronomical modeling using modern computer programs confirmed and expanded on the discoveries of previous researchers. Scientists were able to accurately calculate what astronomical phenomena the builders of Stonehenge could have observed, and understand the complexity of their calendar systems. Ecological studies have restored the picture of the natural environment in which the creators of Stonehenge lived. Analysis of pollen, seeds, and animal bones from archaeological layers has shown how the landscape, climate, vegetation, and wildlife of the Salisbury Plain have changed over the millennia. All this new data has radically changed our understanding of Stonehenge. From a mysterious monument of unknown origin, it has become a well-studied archaeological complex with a detailed reconstructed history. But the more we learn about Stonehenge, the clearer it becomes that it was a truly remarkable achievement of human civilization. In the 21st century, the study of Stonehenge has entered a new phase. Each year brings sensational discoveries that force us to rethink our established ideas about this great monument. Modern archaeologists use increasingly sophisticated technologies that allow them to extract information from the most insignificant finds and even from the seemingly empty space between the stones. One of the most important recent discoveries was the discovery of the Durrington Henge, a huge circular structure with a diameter of more than half a kilometer, located just 3 kilometers from Stonehenge. This monument was found in 2009 using magnetometric surveying and turned out to be one of the largest henges in Europe. Excavations of the Durrington Henge showed that it was built at about the same time as the sarsen ring of Stonehenge, around 2500 BC. Inside the earthen ring, archaeologists discovered the remains of a huge wooden circle made of more than 200 oak posts. This structure was named the Darrington Walls and became the largest wooden circle known in prehistoric Europe. Analysis of the wood from the Darrington Walls yielded striking results. It turned out that all 200 posts were cut down in the same year, 2479 BC. Moreover, dendrochronological analysis showed that the trees were cut down at the same time of year, in late spring or early summer. This testifies to the grandiose organization of the construction project. Even more surprising was the discovery of a connection between Stonehenge and the Darrington Walls. The two complexes are linked by an ancient road, the Avenue, which stretches from Stonehenge to the River Avon, and then along the water to the Darrington Henge. This road was not just a path, but a carefully planned ceremonial route with earthen embankments on either side. Research has shown that Stonehenge and the Darrington Walls functioned as a single complex, but performed opposite functions. While Stonehenge was associated with the cult of the dead, the winter solstice and stone architecture, the Darrington Walls were associated with the world of the living, the summer solstice, and wooden structures. This duality reflected ancient ideas about the cyclical nature of life and death. In 2021, British archaeologists made another sensational discovery. Using the latest seismic sounding methods, they discovered a network of natural karst voids in the chalk rock beneath Stonehenge. These cavities could have created unique acoustic effects and may have been what attracted ancient builders to this site. Genetic research also continues to yield surprising results. In 2019, scientists succeeded in extracting DNA from 5,000-year-old cremated remains. Analysis showed that among those buried in early Stonehenge were people with genetic markers characteristic of the populations of Anatolia and even the Eastern Mediterranean. The study of micro-remains in the soil around Stonehenge has revealed new details about ritual activities in the ancient sanctuary. Scientists have found traces of various plants being burned, including exotic species that did not grow in Britain. These plants may have been used to make incense or psychoactive drinks during religious ceremonies. The use of artificial intelligence to analyze archaeological data opens up new opportunities for studying Stonehenge. Machine learning helps to identify hidden patterns in the arrangement of stones, find new astronomical orientations, and model ancient rituals and ceremonies. Space technology also contributes to the study of the monument. High-resolution satellite images allow new archaeological sites to be discovered in the vicinity of Stonehenge. Satellite data is used to monitor the condition of the monument and plan environmental protection measures. International cooperation in the study of Stonehenge is expanding every year. British archaeologists work closely with colleagues from other countries where there are similar megalithic monuments. Comparative analysis of different complexes helps to better understand the general patterns of development of ancient civilizations. Digital technologies make Stonehenge accessible to millions of people around the world. Virtual tours, 3D models, and interactive applications allow everyone to study the monument in detail without leaving home. These technologies are especially important for education and the popularization of archaeological science. The future of Stonehenge research looks very promising. Scientists plan to use new isotope analysis methods to more accurately determine the origins of ancient people. Advances in genetic technology will allow more information to be extracted from ancient DNA. Improvements in geophysical methods will help to discover even more hidden archaeological sites. One of the most ambitious projects is the creation of a digital twin of the entire archaeological landscape around Stonehenge. This model will include not only existing monuments, but also reconstructions of lost structures, as well as simulations of the ancient natural environment during different historical periods. Stonehenge continues to surprise us with new discoveries and forces us to rethink our ideas about the abilities of ancient people. Each new study shows that our ancestors were much more sophisticated and inventive than we previously thought, and perhaps the most important discoveries are yet to come. The Great Monument on the Salisbury Plain remains one of the greatest mysteries of human civilization. But thanks to modern science, this mystery is gradually transforming from a mystical secret into a fascinating story about the genius, perseverance, and thirst for knowledge of our distant ancestors. The history of Stonehenge is the history of humanity itself, in its eternal quest for the stars.